but he is destined to follow in the footsteps of his father, King Solomon's chief metalworker. After his father is kidnapped, Zaki realizes that he may be the only tracker capable of finding him. But if he does find the kidnappers, what can one boy do? Scorpion's Ascent, now available from Dr. Elisa Aylwine. Order now or purchase in the marketplace.
Woohoo! Well, Daniel paints. I may as well write a novel, right? Because I certainly can't paint. Maybe I can paint a picture with a few words here and there. But I was so excited about Scorpion's Ascent because we've been talking about G2G, generation to generation. And for so many years, you know, it's like we've been trying to find our own footing, and we're a little bit older, but we have to prepare. I mean, Yeshua came onto the scene preparing for his exit, didn't he? And if we're just now thinking about preparing for our exit, we're probably behind. And so we really do need to start creating these links to the next generation so that they will be excited about the word. And they will be excited about exploring that word like Indiana Jones. So I invented this little boy, just sitting down at the Tamar Fortress at night in the... This is the way my head works. I would sit on the walls of the fortress at night, and I would think, I wonder what these people watched on TV on Wednesday night. There's no TV. But they told stories, didn't they? There was always the storytellers, and there were people, that's all they did, walk around and tell stories. And that was important because it was not just sharing news, it was also preserving the stories of the people of Israel was part of that. And so I said, let me listen to these guys walking through here. Like, I didn't literally see people walking through there, but I imagined that I did. And I would hike out in the desert around, and I would listen to the archaeologists, and I would read their papers, and I would listen to the environmentalist lecture there at the Arava Institute. And I would observe the lizards and the wolves and all the cool things down there at the park. And I took all that information, and what I was trying to do was create a social studies textbook that would get kids excited about archaeology. And I ended up just getting more involved in the story than the archaeology. And so I said, okay, we'll just make it a historical novel. And so I'm interested to see how it's received, because I think our kids need more of this. I want them to go back to the Bible and be excited about it. And so I tried to create this little Indiana Jones type boy who has all these Bedouin desert tricks that he's learned as he's grown up. And in the process, it's kind of like the Flintstones. Kids watched it, but the text was really pretty adult. And it's not adult in that way, but it's like there's a level of teaching. You know, when it says young adult novel, when I see adults, sometimes my mind goes in a different direction, like adult stuff, you know, but it's reading age. But if you're an adult, I think you'll like it too, just because there's a level of teaching that's built in there. So spread the word, because if we do well, then the publisher might be interested in the sequel. And if you've ever compared, like looked at historical fiction for young adults on an Amazon page, you would be concerned at what is offered to young people today. It's all about demons and witches and spells and all the perverse things with all the initials LGBTQ and all that. It's hard to find a healthy young adult book that would actually be interesting. So if we can do more of that, that would be hopefully my gift to the next generation. So let's walk on water a little bit, changing gears. And I'd just like to continue what I did at Jacob's tent a few weeks back at Shavuot. And we've been studying in our Zoom classes, walking on water. Because we know this can't, when Yeshua walked on water, that couldn't be the first time this has happened, right? Everything has already happened in the Torah somewhere. And so we took a look at that, and I wanted to take it then in the direction of Shavuot and Mount Sinai. But there's another direction too, which I'm calling the splits. Not don't think something is about to happen where I never could, okay? That never happened. We're not gonna do those kind of splits. We're gonna talk about walking, not just between the waters, but walking between heaven and earth, which is our special privilege as believers in Yeshua. The kingdom is here now, Yeshua told us. It's upon you. We need to remember that so that we know how to walk. So in order to clear that up, so we would understand where we are as believers, I started teaching about not just Peter walking on the water, but I started teaching about the Israelites walking through the water at the Exodus. And so that was my question. What made Peter think he could walk on water? I mean, was there any precedent? And probably to our minds, no. Maybe he just thought he could because Yeshua did it and thought that was cool. I would think that was cool. Like, could I do that? Would that be all right? I want to pop in on people someday, the way that Yeshua did. Walking on water is on that list as well, but I just think popping in on people would be way more fun. But see, Peter was Jewish, and they read things sometimes a little bit differently than we do when we read them only in English. And so this crossing at the Red Sea, which is going to be the precedent for walking on water, when Jews read it, they read it with a little more precision than Cecil B. DeMille. All right, like I said, I'm going to be terribly disappointed when Moses does not look like Charlton Heston. So we get an image in our head from artwork or from movies or whatever, and we think, well, that's the way that looked. But maybe that's not the way it looked at all. So let's go back and read this account of Peter walking on water in Matthew 14. And let's see if we can see some parallels between these two events. And then I want to talk about the splits. I want to talk about what the nations saw as they walked between the splitting of the water. And maybe why this particular event with Yeshua and Peter happened on the Sea of Galilee. So it says in Matthew 14:24, but the boat was already a long distance from the land. A different account says they were actually in the center of the lake. They were in the center of the Galilee. And if you've ever taken the boat ride on the Galilee, you know exactly how far that is. It was battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, which is the last one, in the fourth watch of the night, if you don't have your Timex or your iWatch or whatever, you really don't know when the sun's going to come up. You're guessing. He's walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Yeshua spoke to them saying, "Take courage, it is I." I don't think he said, "It is I." He said, Ani, it's me. Don't be afraid. Peter said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Bo, come." It's actually in that text. I was sitting there reading it just a second. Bo is written in here in Hebrew. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Yeshua. But seeing the wind, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Yeshua stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You have little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "You are certainly God's son." So they recognize now that he has power over the wind, and if he has power over the wind, he has power over the waves. If we compare that account, again, we know that it's going to be a nighttime arranging of the waters of the Red Sea. These winds are going to blow all night so hard that it's going to pile up these waters and do particular things to them to make a pathway for the Israelites. And so we know the Egyptians were destroyed at the morning watch. They were destroyed as the sun comes up. And so it's happening just about the same time. And so in Exodus 14:15, it says, as Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened, just like the disciples. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, just like the disciples, just like Peter. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward, which different verb tense because he's talking to a big group, but it's the same Hebrew sharash. Bo, go. It means come too. Come, go, same word. Then in verse 21, it says, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land. And that's the part that needs to sink in so we can get Cecil B. DeMille out of our heads. He turned the sea into dry land. Got it? He turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were split, they were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on the dry land. And the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So what we can see at this point, and I'll show you more exactly here in just a second how that works, is basically they're walking through a water tunnel that has become dry land. The water here is now, it's not like, okay, moved all that water out and they're all the way down at the bottom of the sea walking on the dry land. No, the water turned into dry land. They didn't have to go down and then come back up. They went straight across. That's important if we're going to understand Yeshua walking on the water and how Yeshua is the substance of the Father. And we also notice that Moses, in that account, he starts out using a staff, but then he ends up just using his hand so the people won't be distracted by the instrument that's in his hand, that they will understand that later they will be able to see the hand of the Father, which is Yeshua. That Yeshua is the actual catalyst. It's not a stick. Yeshua is the catalyst for all these things that are happening. And then we see him use his hand to tell the waters to go back to their natural position, to show that the hand does have power over the sea. So just a little something for your prophecy toolkit. When you see the arm, it's long-term fulfillment, something that's going to happen way down the road. But when you see the hand, it's happening probably right now or in the very near future. And then I'm going to add one to that, which is going to be the bare arm. When something is bare, you can see the flesh. Yeshua is the bare arm of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. You can see him. Here's some more parallels from Exodus 14 to Peter's walk on the water. It says, at the morning watch, the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud and brought the army of Egyptians into confusion. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak. They're walking here in the fourth watch of the night. Once Peter and Yeshua get into the boat, once everybody's in the boat, smash, everything stops. In fact, it says in another account, immediately they were at the place where they were going. It's like they didn't even have to row back to shore. They were immediately there. It was a supernatural journey. And so the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak while the Egyptians were fleeing right into it. And then the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day, which is exactly what Peter asked for. He said, Lord, save me. It's okay. Why would he say that? Well, there's a precedent. The Torah is the prophecy and the prophets are its legs, is the old saying. A true prophecy teacher is a Torah teacher. Try that one on. says, when Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and they believed in the Lord and his servant Moses. That's pretty much the response that the disciples have when Yeshua gets into the boat. They begin to worship him. And so we say, all right, Peter, I'm not going to judge Peter. I like Peter. I would rather, like I say, die trying than to sit in the boat for the rest of my life and wonder if I could have. Because we get way too many of those moments, like Daniel was saying, in hindsight, I missed a moment. 11 of them missed a moment. Peter took the moment, and so he's in the story. The rest of them aren't named. Peter's in the story. Even like, okay, he's learning. But it says, seeing the wind, he became frightened. You can't see wind. You can see what it does. You can't see the wind. But he had this moment of doubt. He's like, okay, Yeshua, if you are who you say you are, tell me to come to you. In fact, he doesn't say tell me, he says command me. Give me a commandment to obey. Come, bo. And then all of a sudden he sees the forces of the Spirit around him. There's all sorts of forces at work here. Because, it's said that Messiah is the only one who can harness the four winds and make them go where he wants them to go. That's part of the expectation of Messiah. Peter knows this. But for a moment, he doubted that Yeshua was that Messiah who could speak to the four winds and have them to obey. And so, yes, these winds were being contrary. But sometimes when the winds are contrary, it's just to create the path of our rescue. So Peter just needed a little more practice. We have to practice our faith. It's more than just believing, oh yeah, I believe that Yeshua was the Messiah. You have to walk like he is. And so this incident happening on the Galilee, remember this area of the Galilee is referred to Galilee of the nations. It has a prophetic aspect to it. And so what's happening right here on the water is going to have an effect on all the nations. In the same way, most of us have not heard this up until now, that what happened at the Reed Sea was also witnessed by all the nations. That's where we're going with the splits. But you have to have faith that he can, if he has called you, then he will also deliver you to the place where you need to go to tell that message. And you have to believe that Yeshua is who he says he is so much that you will practice doing what he tells you to do. Peter was practicing. Sunk a little, but he was practicing way more than the other disciples. Faith without works is dead. So we have to practice doing the word in order to grow those faith muscles. Nobody can work out for me. I would love it if they could, and I would pay them. How much you want? I got several places I need to work on here, right? For that matter, would you mind, taking up jogging or something on my behalf as well? But it doesn't work like that. So there's another verb to have faith. You hear amen. We say amen all the time, or amen. May it be so. But there's a reflexive form of that, which is lehitamen. Lehitamen. You hear amen in there? It means I don't just believe it. I'm going to exercise it. I'm going to do it for myself. I can't pay somebody to have faith for me and walk out the commandments for me. I have to do it for myself. So that's lehitamen. Just like lehit rachetz, you wash yourself. Nobody washes you. That's a different verb. But if you're washing yourself, it's reflexive. Lehitamen is reflexive. You have to have faith for yourself. You have to walk it out for yourself. So when you obey the word, you're building your faith muscles, and that's what Peter's trying to do. He says, command me. Tell me to do it. Because remember, obedience is a direction. When you don't know where you are in the fourth watch of the night and it's as dark as it's going to get and the wind and the waves are overtaking you, obedience is always a direction you can go. If the compass is spinning, obedience is a direction you can go. And just remember, faith is really about Yeshua's ability to hold on to our hand in the storm, not about our ability to hold on to his. He's got us. Because he says in John 10:28, I give eternal life to them and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. Can you imagine Yeshua just letting Peter drown while he watched? Oh, Peter, you should have had more faith, buddy. Where'd you say you were going, guys? No, he's like, come on, Peter, get in the boat. What'd you learn? And that's what he does to us. What did you learn this time? He says, my Father who's given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. If you can't be snatched out of the Father's hand, you can't be snatched out of Yeshua's hand. Just keep walking, keep practicing. That's what it means. It means to drill, to practice. Just keep obeying the commandments. You'll get better. So why, again, did he think he could walk on water? Well, there's a real simple answer in Job 9:8. It says, he alone spreads out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. That's simple. What else? Let's go back to the Reed Sea. Exodus 14:21. In English, it says, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept back the sea by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were split. They were divided. That's an important section of that account of the Israelites walking on water, because it's revisiting something that has happened before in Genesis. At the creation. Remember, he separates the light from the darkness. He separates the waters from the waters. Then he gathers the water and dry land emerges. So they've read this story before. Well, they've heard this story before. I don't know if it's written down. But they know the story of Genesis 1:6-12. They know that there have been occasions before where waters divided. So we know that the pattern was this. The upper and the lower waters were divided on the second day of creation. Next, on the third day, it says the waters were gathered into one place, and the dry land appeared, and then it began bearing fruit trees. The rabbis say there were actually fruit trees in the water that they could pick from as they walked. And it says the children would cry, and the mothers would reach out there and they would grab a pomegranate or an apple for the kids as they made the journey through. Is it just midrash? Did it really happen? We don't really know, but we know it's based on this. It's a principle based on what happened on the third day, that they realized they were in a semi-supernatural place like the Garden of Eden. So the Hebrew explains, if we were to go back and read that in Hebrew, that the heavens, the waters below the heavens, were gathered into one unified place. It doesn't say echat, which is the number one. It says echad, which means unity, solidarity. El makom echad, into one unified place. So there's the pattern. Upper and lower waters are separated. The waters unify, whatever that means, and dry land appears. And then it says the sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on the dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on the right hand and on the left. So if we take that template of the creation and overlay it with the crossing of the Reed Sea, we can see that something actually happened before our vision of the waters separating right and left. That actually there were upper and lower waters that separated. So there's actually water above them, which we would call, what's water above you? A cloud. Not Bill Cloud, not Beth Cloud. You always have to, right? It's just, you can't miss the opportunity. So you have clouds. Later we will be gathered into the clouds. So there's a level of the Shemayim up here. And then down here below, it says it turns into dry land that is echad. It becomes substance. And you say, well, how can water be substance? How can Yeshua be the visible image of the Father? I don't know. It just happened. That's all I can tell you. And then you have walls of water over here that became the consistency of stone walls. So basically, yes, they are walking through a water tunnel of different levels of solidity, I guess you would say. So this journey, it's literally a walk on water, even though the water becomes dry land. So when Peter sees Yeshua's walking around, and the pictures are like the waves are washing over Yeshua, and he's like, no big deal. But basically, he's walking on dry land in the midst of the sea. So let's just see what the Hebrew text says about this walk on water in Exodus. Like I said, in English, we read that Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back. But if we're going to read it in Hebrew, you're seeing what I'm seeing. Vayolech Adonai et hayam. So literally what it's saying, and stretched Moshe his hand over the sea and walked Yod He Vav He the sea. Peter knows, like Yeshua is like telling us he's the image of the Father. He is the substance. The Father cannot be seen. He is a spirit. But if I want to see the Father, Yeshua says, I look at him. He is the substance of the Spirit. And so if I'm seeing Yeshua walk on the water like it's dry land, then that takes me right back to this prophecy, the crossing of the Reed Sea that says, walked Yod He Vav He the sea. And what happens when they get into the boat? They worshiped him. They understood who he was. What happens, the rabbis say, at exactly the same time that they're crossing through the splits, is not just that the Egyptians being held back by the pillar of cloud are seeing them cross. And because see, from Pharaoh's perspective, like if they did go down, wouldn't they all just kind of disappear for a long time? Because it's a long way down to the bottom. But no, they can see them going straight across, and they think they can too. Just remember that. The enemy that's pursuing you cannot go where you're going. They only think they can. But when they get to the other side, the Israelites break out into the Song of the Sea. Moses and the men start singing, and then Miriam and the women take up the chorus and echo. The rabbis say at the time that they're crossing the sea, the nations themselves also witnessed splitting of the waters all over the entire world. Every single nation experienced something in the world stopped, and bodies of water started splitting all over the world, and every nation saw. Now that sounds pretty incredible, doesn't it? Like, really? Where's that in the Bible? Exodus 15, 14 through 19. It says, the peoples have heard. This is the song right after it happens, guys. This is not 200 years later. Right after the event, this is what the Israelites are singing. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Anguish has gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. The chiefs of Edom were dismayed. The leaders of Moab, trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they are motionless as stone. When he says arm, that's a far forward prophecy. This will happen again. Terror and dread fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they are motionless as stone. In other words, they were frozen in place and forced to watch the salvation of the Israelites. A day will come when the world will have to stand still. They will be forced to be motionless as stone and watch your final redemption. They won't be able to move as you are rescued. It says, until your people pass over, O Lord, until the people pass over whom you have purchased, you will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. They're referring basically to the Garden of Eden here. Because remember, one day the Garden of Eden will marry Jerusalem. The land will be called married. The Lord shall reign forever and ever, for the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea on them. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea. So from this, they're saying all over the world, nations were forced to watch the splitting of the waters and the salvation of Israel. And from there, they went to Mount Sinai. And the tradition there is that at Mount Sinai, when the Torah went forth, it went forth in the 70 languages of the world. The Torah went out all over the world. It was offered. Do you want this? Only one nation, as a nation, said, we will do and we will hear. The rest, there was only a remnant. There was a remnant among all those nations. And so in Acts chapter 2 at Shavuot, Peter still has the prophecy connections, not just of the crossing of the Reed Sea that he experienced with Yeshua, but now also standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, hearing those 70 languages of the world being offered, and now Peter standing here in Jerusalem at Shavuot, and all of a sudden the disciples are speaking in the languages of the world of those people who have assembled. And they're saying, we're all hearing it in our own language. And Peter's like, well, yeah. It's Acts chapter 2, right? Is that what he said? That was supposed to be funny. He didn't know he was writing Acts chapter. Anyway. So that's what we need to remember. Water was dry land. What was spirit was flesh. The Israelites were born again. They were born again in Egypt by the blood of the Lamb, and then they were born again. They were nationally mikvahed as they walked through this tunnel of water and walked to Shavuot where they would receive their covenant. And so he's taking, I want the nations to see this, so they're going to be ready when I offer them in these 70 languages, when I offer them this Torah, they're going to have a little heads up. This is what's coming. Let the righteous remnant get ready and prepare their garments. And among those nations, there was a righteous remnant. Because see, remember, it's always been intended to be a house of prayer for all nations from the beginning. From the time there was a fall, he made a path back. Which for every righteous remnant, there's also a wicked one. Amalek is still out there among the nations. But it tells us that Yeshua is this bared holy arm that the nations not only saw then, they will see again. Remember, Yeshua, the arm, long-term prophecy, the hand, close. But see, the arm is all of it. And so when the arm is bare, you can see flesh. Yeshua is the flesh. We can see him. And it says in Isaiah 52:10, the Lord has bared his holy arm in the sight of all the nations, so that all the ends of the earth may see the salvation, the Yeshua of our God. That's pretty exciting. Right now, we are continuing Peter's work on the Sea of Galilee. Remember, it's Galilee of the nations. He was telling these disciples, you're fishermen. I called you because you're fishermen. I want you to understand that you are going to be sent out. I haven't given up on the righteous remnant in these 70 nations. Now you are going to take the gospel. You're going to tell them about me, that you have seen the bare arm. And you are going to take the bare arm and testify of me out there in all the nations. And that's what he says in John 14:9. He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? They saw the bare arm. He says, I and the Father are one. He says, we are echad. Every day, morning and evening, you say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Why? Because the waters were gathered into one place. Water represents spirit, as does fire. The pillar was made of cloud and of fire. So what is the substance of that water and that fire? What is the bare arm of that? Yeshua. The nations will see him. He is the substance of the Father. He was resurrected on the third day when that dry land appeared because it became echad. He is echad with the Father. This is why you say the Shema twice a day, to remind yourself that Yeshua is echad with the Father. If you are in Yeshua, Yeshua is in the Father, then you are echad with Yeshua and the Father. And now you are the substance, you are the bare arm of Yod He Vav He that people can see, and you can testify to them in those languages of the world. Yeshua came to save you. Be part of those who will be seen exiting into the cloud. Don't be the one frozen in place watching it. He is the resurrection on the third day, and he will come and he will gather us into the clouds. And this is why I think he says to Peter, and why Peter wanted to hear, Bo, come. Because that's what was told to the sons of Israel. Vayavau, come. It's a collective congregation form of the verb. Yeshua needed to be recognized as the one who can guide even a contrary wind. We want to say that, in fact, saying the Shema is part of an old rabbinic discussion. They say you always want to do your evening Shema before midnight. They say, why would you do that? Why is that important? Because stuff happens. Things can happen. You could fall asleep. And then you would forever lose that chance to say Shema. And while it's like a signal of spiritual alertness. It goes back, count how many times in Scripture it says about midnight. In your Passover Haggadah, there's a section in there, and it's like for 3 pages, about midnight, about midnight, about midnight. Why? Say that Shema. Eat that lamb. Make sure that lamb is gone before midnight, because salvations are coming. Immersions are coming. So you prepare, you be ready at midnight, because you don't know what's going to happen. As Yeshua said, is it the third watch of the night? Is it the fourth watch of the night? You better be prepared. And this is what the Shema is all about. It reminds you to be prepared. Because once the sun comes up, you can't say the previous day's Shema. And how much language do we have in Scripture about being awake, staying alert? Behold, I come as a thief in the night. If you know he's coming as a thief in the night, possibly in the third or the fourth watch of the night, wouldn't you want to get that Shema said before midnight? Wouldn't you want to pray to the Father and say, Father, I am alert, I am prepared, I am ready for whatever is coming. I want to listen to you. I want to hear you say to me, Bo, or Bowie if you're a girl. There are still boys and girls. So we have this Bo command that's associated with the salvation of Israel and the return of the exiles to Israel. So he says, tell the children of Israel, Yavu, tell them to get into the reeds. See, the nations are forced to watch. This happens again in the book of Revelation. Remember the 2 witnesses in Revelation 11:12? It seems like they're dead, and then all of a sudden they're resurrected, and it says, everybody. It says, they went up into heaven in the cloud, and their enemies watched them. All over the earth, people are going to be able to see the resurrection of the two witnesses. And I don't think they're going to be using iPhones and laptops. I don't think it's going to be a television program. That would be too easy. I think when this resurrection happens, it's going to be exactly like it was at the crossing of the Reed Sea. It's going to be exactly like it was at Mount Sinai, and they will be frozen in place watching those witnesses resurrect. The same way they're going to be frozen in place watching you resurrect. Until your people pass over, is what it says. So when he says to Peter, "Bo, on the Galilee of the nations," it means something. Revelation 4:1, it says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things.'" All right, we can associate a door standing open in heaven. Think of the Passover. And think of them being called up on Mount Sinai. And in between, Bo, come through this mikveh, come through this water. Because when you come up on the new side, on this other side, you're a new person, aren't you? Isn't that what the immersion does? You're a brand new person when you come out on the other side. So you've got salvation, and you're going to come to salvation as well when you come to the Torah. You're going to begin to experience it, like Daniel said. Not just learn it, experience your salvation. It's a journey. And so this repeated bo, bo, bo that we keep coming up with, it's really a bridge to the Song of Songs, 4:16, and then the next two verses, which are 5:1 and 2, which say, "Awake," awake, by the way, is a resurrection term, "O north wind, and come wind of the south." Now, I have in italics wind because it's actually an ellipsis in the Hebrew text. It means it's not there. It's been added for clarification. When you read it without the added English words, it's basically "Awake, O north, and come south." What does that mean? Well, it is said that Messiah is hidden in the north. And when it says "Awake, O north," there's maybe we call it a double entendre. It's a call to Messiah. You have been in a period of inactivity, so awake. Arouse yourself and come south. Jerusalem is considered the south in the rabbinic literature. But part of it too is there's south and there's deep south. We're deep south now. We're really deep south, y'all. I don't know. I was born in California, so I just kind of divide my time between you guys and y'all. So I'm a little conflicted. But when you go deep south, you end up going south of Jerusalem, down through the Dead Sea or the Salt Sea, down through the Arava, all the way to the Red Sea. And this is where Ezekiel prophesies in 47 and 48 that the nations, they're going to come up that river of life, because the flow starts out of Jerusalem and it flows all the way, just like a road going right down through there past Tamar. That's why I say Tamar is a wonderful place to be, because you better see it now before it fills up with water. He also says there's going to be so much water that they will have fishermen drying their nets. And it's actually a sea twice in history, and the water drained out. I can always say, I hiked the bottom of that before the water came back in the time of Messiah. When that river of life came down from Jerusalem, it says the nations are going to go up this river. And there's a tree of life, it says, growing on either side. But then it also talks about trees of righteousness that are in this same location. And you say, well, which one is it? Is it the tree of life? Or is it trees of righteousness? Yes. Because these trees of righteousness are totally tapped into the tree of life. And it's going to be their job to prepare these nations. They don't just run through the gates of Jerusalem any old way. It says unclean things are outside. You don't drag unclean things into holy territory where even the bells of the horses are holy, where the cooking pots, the average cooking pot has the same degree of holiness as what's being used in the temple. No, you just don't run into the presence of the king like that. It's going to be our job, a royal priesthood coming to the forefront to say, we are here to help. If we have been resurrected from the dead, what does it say? We can go in and out of the gates. We're prepared. We have a resurrected body like Yeshua's. We can walk on water. We can pop in on people if we want to. Well, if he says we can, we can. And I want to. If I can. So just expect, in that day that I might pop in on you from time to time. What's up? Got anything to eat? That's part of the preparation, is following that river so that you see the immersion there that's taking place with these nations that are left that haven't, this is, they didn't go up against Jerusalem. These are the ones who are left. They're traumatized, they're wounded, and they need healing. And it says these leaves are for the healing of the nations. And so the word that we're planting in us is so that we can be part of that extended hand of Yeshua, our King Messiah, ruling and reigning in Jerusalem. And we're going to say, folks, let us introduce you to the Torah. Before you just run into the city for Sukkot, like Zechariah is prophesying, let's do a little prep work here. Let's talk about the difference between what's clean and unclean. Let's talk about the feasts. Let me teach you a little bit more about that. Let's talk about the purities of Scripture. Let's talk some more about immersion into Messiah and what that means. We can prepare them so that when they do approach the gates, and we know the 12 tribes will also be guarding the 12 gates into Jerusalem to make sure that we don't have another Nadav and Avihu incident, that as they arrive at the gates, they're going to pass muster where they can go in and they can freely worship in this house of prayer for all nations. We're called to be part of that. And so where it says, awake, O north, and come, bow, south. There's two lessons to be learned there. Part of that is a prophetic call to Messiah to awake, to arouse yourself, to gather your people. And also to the exiles to prepare to be gathered, to also awake at the resurrection of the dead, and to be part of this preparation to be able to thrive along the river of life and to produce fruit every month. You say, well, that's a crazy thing those rabbis are saying about there being fruit trees in the water, and the kids were crying, and the mama would take the fruit and give it to the kid to make them quit crying as they're going across the Reed Sea. Well, isn't that exactly what's going to happen in the millennium? We got a bunch of crybabies coming up. You think we cry a lot. There's going to be people here without a resurrected body. And they don't know much except they know Yeshua is the king and we better figure out what to do next. I know I was traumatized after one day of war on October 7th. I can only imagine what people will be like, what condition they will be in after a tribulation without a resurrected body. So there'll probably be a lot of sinking and grabbing as they come to terms with Yeshua. But we get to be part of that healing process. We are going to be those ministers of reconciliation. It goes on, it says, make my garden breathe out its fragrance. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choice fruits. It goes back to the garden, the tree of life. And do you know the tradition is that, y'all didn't say glory. It says 4:31. You were supposed to say glory at 5. Okay, now they say glory. Okay, I get one glory. Let my beloved come into his garden. The tradition is that the bride goes under the chuppah first, and then the bridegroom waits until she says, come, Bo, may my beloved come into his garden. And so he has a resurrected bride being called to awake, to resurrect from the dead. She's being taken up in the cloud, planted in the garden. The odor, the fragrance of obedience is going to be so strong, it says it's going to be wafted abroad. It's going to go out into the world. And see, sometimes when we keep the Torah, it just stinks. How we act and our attitude about it, like Keisha was teaching about humility, not much space for anybody else after me in the Torah. But see, with humility, we learn his ways. With humility, we walk in his ways. And we can already let his fragrance go out when we keep a commandment in the sight of people. You can't keep it a secret. It has to be wafted abroad. When you keep it, don't announce it. That's not what I'm saying. Like, da, 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 commandment number. No, don't do like that. It's your experience. Now, it's who you are. It's how you're walking or swimming, whatever, however you do it. But see, if you have joy in the commandments, it's going to have a fragrance to it. If it's for pride, self-righteousness, it just stinks. We want it to be a fragrant aroma. We want to smell, when you smell good fruit, you know the difference when you go to the grocery store than when you pick up something like, that's like a day or two past. Like the bananas, no question, unless you like them like that. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Like I say, the main difference, like I said, between what I wanted you to see today and maybe what you can compare to what we did at Shavuot is that the nations are watching. They're watching our journey. They'll watch our exit. They'll watch our return. And they will imitate what us old folks do, old folks in Yeshua do, as they make that journey up, like Zechariah says, to worship at Sukkot. When they start coming up for the feast, we get to teach them. And they get to imitate what they see us doing. And this is what the Father says, you shall be holy, for I am holy. For now, it's up to us to sanctify ourselves on this earth. Remember, reflexive, lehita man, I have to practice doing it. And if we will practice doing it here, he says, I will sanctify and perfect you in heaven. It's not your job to finish the job. It's your job to walk in the job, do the job, and he makes it perfect at the resurrection. And when people see us walking with that attitude, that will entice them to listen. Tell me about this. The nations of our exile, because now we're out on our Sea of the Galilee. They have to see us walk in holiness. They have to see us walk through the splits. And they have to see us as we take his pomegranates, his commandments, and when we're wounded, we eat that fruit. Because see, if we handle pain the world's way, nothing good's going to come of it. But if we handle our pain his way and take from his word, from his fruit, and comfort our crybaby selves with that, it will produce a resurrection in us, because we have to show people how to do that so that we can guide them to his house of prayer, like it says in Zechariah 14:16. So we'll end with this. We'll end with this. The nations, we know, will be deceived at least twice with Gog and Magog, and tomorrow I'm going to teach on Gog and Magog. We know that Satan will be released from his prison, and it says he will come out to deceive the nations. Our job is to make sure they're not deceived, at least by our behavior. But that's the job of the adversary, is to deceive the nations as to the nature of their creator. And this is tough. When we fail to walk in ever-increasing holiness, immersing ourselves into the word Yeshua, we actually become part of the serpent's deception among the nations of our exile. In the same way that the serpent deceived in the garden to begin with, because he twisted the word, he twisted it in the temptation of Yeshua. That's what he does. If we fail to walk in ever-increasing faithfulness in his word, if we continue sinning after we've come to a knowledge of Yeshua without a practice of repentance, then we also are like the serpent, deceiving the nations concerning the purity of the kingdom that is coming to this earth. And they will continue to believe that they can fall into the kingdom just any old way. That's a deception. That's not the way the kingdom works. We got a lot of grace right now. Let's make hay while the sun shines. Because once they've been frozen in place, watching the resurrected go into the cloud, it's everlasting too late, at least for that stage. So we don't want to just walk on water. If you have to swim sometimes because you sink, swim. Some days you can run, some days you're gonna climb, and some days you're just gonna crawl like a little child into the kingdom. And if you have to crawl like a little child into the kingdom, just know this is what the kingdom's made of. A humble little child first. Don't be afraid to just take him at his word and do what you have to do each day to walk in that faithfulness.
Very good. So we do have a couple of changes that we need you to note, and if you would pass the word along, that would be great. The food will not be at the cafe. It will now be here at registration, but you may eat at the cafe. So those who order their meal, you're going to get it right back here at the registration. Also, the workshop tomorrow with Gabe Bello and Cole Hostetler will not be at the Hampton. It's actually going to be here in the lobby at the entrance. So we'll re-announce that a couple more times, but if that's tomorrow afternoon at 3:30, but help us get the word out that no one is going to a workshop at the Hampton. We did get it back over here. Also, the prayer forms, a reminder about that, prayer forms in the prayer box is at registration. So anybody that would like some special prayer for needs, put it in there. The prayer team will pray for them, and let's trust the Father that those answers will come soon. Tonight's service begins at 7:30. We have several special things planned for tonight. And then at 10 o'clock, we have even more special. It's a lot of fun things from 10 until midnight. So we ask you to stick around and watch that. And I think that's it. So let's be dismissed and go get supper and be back here tonight to start at 7:30. So get here a little bit